All right, I see it live here on my computer.
Yeah.
Give this a second to pop up. All right, looks like it's working. All right, we got Frad Lowe's in the comment section. Hello, Frad Lowe's. About to get another couple person here in a second. My computer's being very slow. It says 0 watching though, which is interesting because we just got a comment from Frad Lowe's. And I can't ask people how the sound is because no one's watching. Alright, we got 2 people watching right now. For everyone out there who is watching at home, let us know how our sound is. We'd like to know. Leave us a comment, or if you have us, shoot us a message. Let us know how the sound's working. And things will be really, really good. So just stick around for just a second and we'll get started with the content of today's program. Got 3 watching. Good. Like I said, everyone, just stick around, and in a second we will be starting today's show. We're going to be discussing different political theories. So if you ever heard about different political theories, don't know what they are, you're going to find out. So it'll be really, really cool. Just give us just a second. Oh wait, 4 watching. Good, we got 4 people up. Fantastic. You about ready to start, Enzo?
Yeah, I'm about ready to start.
Alright, everyone, we are about to start. Let me leave a comment here, maybe people will see. Ask everyone how the audio is real quick. Maybe someone will answer, maybe they won't, but we're going to find out. So I hope it sounds good because, like I said, I can't hear what we're doing right now, so I'm not sure exactly how it sounds. I hope it sounds good, with these microphones being the only thing that picks up.
Yeah.
Also, everyone, let us know, if you're watching, let us know how the set is. We obviously moved some stuff around. Looks a lot better than last time when we did a live stream, so let us know what you think about it. And who knows? I like it. I really love this set.
Oh yeah, it's very good. I don't know. Do you got the outline up, Bobby?
I do. So I guess we can go ahead
as
and
well.
get started here then.
Okay, I'll intro us in.
And the one thing I don't have to do is clap anymore.
Yeah. Hello, you are listening to Trump Republic Radio. It is January 12th, 2018. I'm your host, Enzo Quesada, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Bobby Hester.
Hello, everyone.
And this show is live on YouTube. You know, this is the first time we've really done a planned midweek for a live show. It's something special. This is also the 25th midweek mini podcast we've done, so another milestone there, Bobby.
Yes.
So this week for the midweek mini podcast, we're talking about political theories. This is something that I've had planned for a couple weeks. I wanted to do it even before Christmas, but we had so many interviews around the Christmas time. You know, it was something I just put off. But now that we're in the new year, our schedule is clear. I haven't really been scheduling guests, and I just kind of want to go through something relaxed, easy to do, and that's talk about political theories.
All right. Well, all I got to say before we start is, like I said, for everyone watching at home, you are free to write some comments in the YouTube box, and if it's a good comment, we might read it on the show or ask us a question about anything. I'm sure with political theories, there probably will be a lot of questions people have to ask about this.
Yeah.
So,
this is
it'll come in very well.
An informative little thing. I created a pretty extensive outline. We're going to go through a bunch of different political theories. just about most political theories that are around. There's some that we're not going to go into that are a little too esoteric. Georgism being particularly something that I was thinking about doing.
We could do an entire midweek podcast on Georgism.
I don't think people want to know
about
Georgism that intensely, though.
If you ever need something to just like listen to while you're trying to fall asleep, we should do an entire midweek episode on Georgism.
I would have to do some extensive research preparing for that, but Georgism... Well,
you know a friend who's a Georgist, so we could just bring him on the show and say, talk.
Yeah, he created an outline, or a PowerPoint that was about 35 slides on Georgism. Very, very in-depth. I wish I still had it. I was looking for it, but...
If you're listening and you don't know what Georgism is, just Google it, because we're not going to cover it.
No, definitely not.
But I guess we should go ahead and just
One thing I do think that we should mention is we get the Facebook now.
Yes.
Big thing is the Facebook. Just looking on Facebook, it's Trump for Public Radio, pretty easy to find. Got the same logo as the podcast.
It's you can, if you're looking at the description of this video, or even the description of if you're listening in later on the actual podcast itself, you can look at the description. We'll have the link to the Facebook and all of our social media pages. And also, if you are watching on YouTube, you'll see that we've got our little thing that keeps changing down there in the bottom at the bottom of the screen, so that'll tell you the links and everything, and advertises also our social media pages. So.
Yeah, such as Facebook, Twitter, and Gab.
And PewTube.
And PewTube. Love our PewTubes. So, let's just get into it. We're going to start off with something that me and you are very familiar with, although we're not as fun as we used to be. And that is libertarianism.
Yes.
Very... I get mixed emotions when I talk about libertarianism because I used to spend several years, doing political activism in regards to libertarianism around the country, but a little disillusioned to it. But libertarianism, it also is known as classical liberalism, also minarchism. That's roughly the ballpark that we're talking about with libertarianism. But yeah, just for every single one of these theories, we're just going to kind of go through what is composed of, the theory. What are the different components, and I don't know, whatever comes to mind.
And we're obviously not going to spend too much time on each one.
No.
Like, we did an entire midweek podcast on paleoconservatism. Yeah, and that one we spent like an hour and a half talking about it. We're not going to do that here. It's going to be relatively brief for each one because we got a lot to go through, and we're trying not to make this one too long of an episode, so we should get started with libertarianism here.
So libertarianism, one of the most important things about libertarianism is the non-aggression principle, the idea that you can't use force on other people unless force is used upon you. And this is how they view a lot of their interactions with, government. They want a government based on the non-aggression principle. As long as no one's harming other people, aggressing them, you leave them alone. And it runs into pretty much every different aspect of libertarianism, with drugs, for example. If someone is smoking marijuana or even doing harder drugs, they're doing meth. As long as they're not aggressing you or attacking you, they don't want to do anything about it. Leave peaceful people alone. The only people that are really hurting is themselves.
And that's also a key component of it is you have the right to do with your body what you want. And what that happens is in libertarianism that actually comes into a lot of split decisions on issues like abortion. Where is it your body or is it someone else's body, and that other person's body, can you use force against them? Can you kill the baby? Can you end the pregnancy? Libertarians are almost split 50-50 on abortion, at least it was when I was involved back in the movement. But another concept on that is, whereas people may disagree on things like abortion, if you think it's something like prostitution, voluntarily selling sex of your body, for money. Almost, you'd have 100% agreement for libertarians because it's someone's body. It's their choice about what they do with it. If they want to become a prostitute, fine. If they want to do drugs, fine. Or if they want to harm themselves, even, end their own life, they have the right to do that. Because under libertarianism, it's your body, it's your body, your choice.
The non-aggression principle also goes into many different aspects of libertarianism, such as the idea that taxation is theft. So it's the idea to where, if I have a job and I receive a paycheck, in the United States, I'm going to be taxed by the government for my paycheck. They're going to take it out of every single paycheck. But the government, if I don't pay taxes, they're going to use force to extract that money from me, the product of my labor. So that's why libertarians see taxation as theft, because it's not something I can opt out of. They require to take from me, and that's why libertarians, advocate for as little taxes as possible, if not no taxes whatsoever. But yeah, that's definitely an important aspect of libertarianism there, how the non-aggression principle plays into taxation.
Because as part of the non-aggression principle, it essentially says you may not use physical force, or you can't cause any physical pain, any monetary pain on people, and that includes stealing, because private property is also a very big part of libertarianism. You own your property, and you have the right to do with that property. Just like we said with the body issue, you have everything you own is yours, and so part of that is the money that you have made, the money that you've earned at your job, and the government coming in and taxing it, or essentially stealing it, is a big no-no for libertarianism. So that's why the issue of taxation and theft is such a big deal.
And another thing with the non-aggression principle is, in foreign policy, they're non-interventionists. They don't want to get involved with the world in a degree that requires force unless they've already been aggressed. Now, they do want to interact with the world, which is where their desire for free trade comes from, because there's a thing called comparative advantage, to where if someone in a different country, let's say Mexico produce is lower, cheaper than the United States. The United States is best off focusing on what it does best. Say we make cars, and Mexico will buy our cars and we'll buy their produce, and it will be better for the consumers in the end because they'll have cheaper products.
And that also includes the immigration factor as well, because not only is there a free market for products, there's also a free market for labor. And when you have people that are immigrants, whether they be legal or illegal, at least when we were involved in libertarianism, it seemed like there was a lot more open borders libertarianism than closed borders libertarianism, which got down to a lot of debates about private property and whether or not a government owns, collective property, whether or not that should mean we even have borders, even, because most of the people I knew that were libertarians tended to be open borders libertarians, saying that, yeah, if there's people out there, if you're trying to hire someone to do a job, and one person, you can hire them for $15 an hour, or you can hire, a unskilled immigrant from in front of Home Depot that might be illegal for $5 an hour. You're, as a person who has a profit incentive, you are inclined to do that. So that's why that's one of the big things that turned me off about libertarianism, because I was a big person on immigration, and I wanted more closed borders. But that's one of the things that, again, there is a debate among libertarians between open borders and closed borders. But as of right now, at least from my opinion, looking outward in towards the libertarianism movement, it does seem like the open border side is winning.
From my experience with it, I would say it's like 70-30 in support of open borders of libertarianism now, at least amongst people that are more hardcore. They're definitely very, pro-immigration. But, yeah, let's we can quickly talk about some other aspects. Individualism is, the most important aspect of them. They, talk about the rights of the individual. And one thing with libertarianism is they don't believe in positive rights. They only believe in negative rights. So you have the right that you don't have like a positive right would be, healthcare is a right. But for healthcare to be a right, that implies that I have a right to someone else's labor. The only rights I have is, people don't have the right to aggress from me. People aren't entitled to things, like positive rights are.
And everything that libertarians believe in flows through the non-aggression principle.
Yes.
And it's funny because there are some libertarians.
The non-aggression principle and property rights are pretty much the two things.
Yeah, and even then, like I said, almost everything goes through that principle. Like, for instance, libertarians are very pro-gun. You know, you have a right to defend yourself. That also means you have a right to own guns. Do you have a right to shoot someone? No, because that would be using force on them. And the thing about the non-aggression principle is people get it confused. It's not the non-force principle. It's the non-aggression principle. If, let's say, someone attacks you, someone starts shooting at you, and you start shooting back and you win that fight, okay? Under the non-aggression principle, as long as the other person started it and started, shooting at you first, you've done absolutely nothing wrong, even though potentially you might have killed somebody. And the same thing goes with all rights, like property rights. If someone walks on your yard, theoretically, you would have the right to kill them if you take that all the way, because they are using force by trespassing on your property because it's your property. And so a lot of things like that, obviously, you can see don't really necessarily agree with 100% of U.S. law, but under an ideal anarcho-capitalist state, which, not really anarcho-capitalist, we're going to talk about that later, but libertarianism, that would work under those, if you use the non-aggression principle and you apply that to every single individual action and choice people make, that's what it all gets filtered through.
And, another component of property rights and the non-aggression principle is the libertarian stance on freedom of association, and with that is things such as affirmative action. So what libertarians believe in is they don't believe that the government should force you to associate with people. You shouldn't have to, include people or serve people at your business or, rent out to anyone.
Because if you were forced to rent to someone, if you were forced to hire someone, what you are doing is you are not being able to control your own property. And because you can't control your own property, that means someone else, i.e. the government, through a decision or through a law, is using force against you.
If I don't comply, the government will use force against me.
And that also brings up, you have the right to associate, you have the right to discriminate.
Yeah. And this has been a very big debate in libertarianism. We all remember, well, me and you at least, we remember the Gary Johnson bake the cake thing. The whole idea of, should the baker who doesn't support gay marriage, should he be required to bake the gay wedding cake? In a libertarian society, no, because we don't want a government intervention forced into someone who's not aggressing someone else. And one of the things that comes along with, having freedom of association is, say someone is racist in their business practices and they don't want to sell goods to minorities or whatever it is. They're not aggressing other people in doing so, but it also is outing them. It's not good for them in the marketplace. It just shows people that, this is someone that I don't want to associate with.
And though people use these types of free market, I personally am a believer in a fairly free market in terms of the way that things work. Like, let's say you were a baker and you didn't want to bake for gay weddings and make cakes. If you were, like you said, openly outed like that, most people are going to say, well, even though I'm not gay, if I'm going to get a wedding cake, I'm not going to go there because I disagree with them. And that's called the free market. And they will either gain business from that or they will lose business from that. Most of the time, I think that they would lose business from that to the point where I doubt they'd be able to stay in business. And no one had to do anything. No one had to use any laws. No one had to use the government to go in and tell them what to do. All it had to do was just them doing what they want and then people reacting to it. And that's the free market, which libertarians do agree on. It doesn't take government force. So there are some beliefs like that still, carry over to me today, even though I've shifted more out of libertarianism. Some things like that just do make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Some other parts of libertarianism, they don't believe in a welfare state, subsidizing. When you have a society where you subsidize the bottom portion of your society, your lower class, at the expense of the upper class, you have a bottom-heavy society. At least that's how libertarians see it. So it, dissuades people from working or being productive or, trying to be socially immobile.
And, you run into a lot, Democrats and liberals like to use the whole argument about, like, well, you just want people to be dying in the streets then. Well, in a way, they're almost kind of right, because in a libertarian society, it is kind of a survival of the fittest. It really is. There is no safety net. There's no welfare state.
To a big degree, yeah.
And if you're in that society, you're going to be paying for your own health care. You're going to be paying for your own anything, really. Everything you'd be paying for. Unless someone voluntarily gave it to you for free, which, if someone voluntarily gives you something for free, libertarians don't have a problem with that. But being forced to do it. So, yeah, you actually would have, poor people would not be able to afford medical insurance. They would begin to die off. They would decide to have less children if they can't afford to raise them. If they don't have money for surgeries or for treatments, they probably will die from it. And in a libertarian society, if it is survival of the fittest, and you have the bottom rung of your society that just, I could just say, doesn't make it, in a libertarian society, that almost would help out the rest of society, because in a society like we have today, we have a safety net that has to take care of those people, and that is money that's being funneled from the top to the bottom in order to make the bottom do that. If you weren't having to purposely funnel that money, that bottom rung would disappear over time.
And also, going back to taxation as theft, to what ends are people that are poor entitled to the money of others to subsidize their shortfalls? And one of the things about, the welfare state is, to a large degree, it is one of the most dysgenic programs that exist in our society. It subsidizes people that make poor choices, that, generally we don't want them to have the most children. You think you'd want the people that are the most successful and make the best choices in life, you want them to have kids. But where it stands in our current society, people that are well-to-do often have less kids.
Yeah.
Because they've been so focused on their career. And, if they weren't taxed so heavily to the degree that, at least we were doing in the past, not so much now since we passed tax reform, maybe the money's not there to do it so much. They don't feel ready to do so, especially in the middle class.
And even then, people who have money, especially the middle class, they know whether or not they can afford to have children. And if they can't afford to have children, then they tend to not have them. Whereas people that are poor, especially people that are on government services like welfare or whatever, if they have a child, they will receive enough government, benefits, I guess I could say, to where they can afford to raise that child. They're not going to be rich. They might be going to a not-so-good school, but they'll get by enough to the point where they don't have to worry about, feeding that child. You have services for that. How is my kid going to get an education? You have free public schools. How's my kid going to get around? You have bus systems and other things like that. And granted, you would probably have bus systems in a libertarian society.
Yeah.
It would be, probably more of a
it'd be privatized.
It would be privatized. You'd have multiple different bus companies all competing against each other to have better routes. They'd be competing against each other to have lower prices, maybe more comfortable buses. Definitely they'd try to want to save as much money as possible. So if you had different types of gasoline that were cleaner for the environment, and one person advertised, we have cleaner gas, that might bring people towards them, which again is free market at work. Except instead of saying like, oh, here's a bus system, anyone who wants to get on it can get on it. And even, cities do tend to sell stuff like bus passes and stuff like that. So you have similar systems like that today. And even if you look at the Postal Service, the post office is a government program, and it's extremely highly inefficient. You have other services out there like FedEx, UPS, that are private companies that do very similar things to what the post office does, and they're cheaper and more efficient. Everyone knows that.
Because they have a strong dollar monetary incentives to do well, to where the government programs are guaranteed to receive funding no matter how good their product is.
I mean, a couple of years ago, everyone was talking about it. The post office lost billions of dollars. It's been losing billions of dollars. It can't sustain itself. That's excuse me. That's why the post office has started delivering mail on Sundays. They've got an agreement with Amazon to deliver packages on Sundays. They didn't used to do that. They're talking about having all-day Sunday delivery. That's something they never used to have. The only reason they can do that is because they can't afford it. Otherwise, they have to open it up. And look at things like, if I want to send someone a message, I'm no longer writing them a letter, putting a stamp on it, putting it through the mail, and wait 3 days before they get it. I'm calling them on the phone. I'm texting them. If it's something long, I will send them an email. And so the actual use of just like everyday letters, the only stuff I get in the mail anymore, unless it's a package that I've ordered, is a bill or like advertisements, junk mail.
Yeah.
And so you don't see like the post office delivering all that sort of stuff. They wouldn't do that because your customers would not like it. And so in a libertarian society, that stuff just would not exist. And also, I think I kind of want to go back to one other thing we were talking about when it talked about like the rights that you have, how they're like positive rights versus negative rights.
Yeah.
You have a right to be offensive. Yeah. Nobody else has the right to not be offended.
My words don't aggress you unless I'm threatening you.
Yeah, unless I'm directly threatening. Like if I was to say, Enzo, you're such a nice person, I love you. If you were someone like who is like a radical crazy feminist like today, and you got that message, you might think that that's harassment.
Yeah.
I haven't threatened you. In fact, I've complimented you. If I said, Enzo, I'm going to throw a boulder onto your head, that's different. That is, a threat of violence. Or are you saying like, come over here and I'll punch you in the face? That is a threat of violence. That would not be allowed. But if I was to just like theoretically take off all my clothes, is that a threat? Is that violence? Most people would probably say it's kind of weird. Yeah. Nowadays, that would definitely be considered sexual harassment or sexual assault. But have you physically assaulted someone? No.
But also, you need to remember, this is also in the context of property rights.
Right.
So if you're doing this on my property,
you
you are aggressing me if I ask you to stop this and you don't do it.
Right.
Because now you're violating my property
And you could
rights.
kill me and it would be okay because it's within your property rights. Someone doesn't leave your property, you can shoot at them if you want.
Yeah. I guess a couple more things I want to talk about for libertarianism before we move on is this is often how libertarianism is described. It's fiscally conservative and socially liberal. For the most part, at least, people, they support gay marriage because, well, one, they don't want the government involved in marriage whatsoever, but you're not aggressing on other people by, homosexuals marrying. Another thing I want to touch on is as far as education, a lot of libertarians support vouchers so we can privatize schools. I know there's a lot of libertarians that don't like school vouchers because it's still government control over, where the money goes to a degree. But in a libertarian society where you're privatizing things, to a large degree that we don't have currently in society, they'd privatize a lot of functions of government. As far as schools would go, and this is how the argument goes, you want to reward teachers that do well, and you want to not reward teachers that do poorly. And in a system where you allow there to be a free market in, education, as opposed to where it is now for the most part, where the government just does this, you'll have more ability for parents to have a school system that caters to what they want their children learning as opposed to what the standard the state sets. Every individual school or a company that runs a school can set its own standards with how they want to do things, and if you don't agree with how they're doing things, you take your money and you go somewhere else. But how it is for a lot of education currently, your only option is the public school that's in your district. And a lot of people, especially the left, they hate the idea of private education, even though, I've been involved with education and support it immensely. They say, oh, but the kids in public school are going to suffer so much because they're going to be taking money out of these schools. But it's just the money that goes to these students individually to begin with. If you had a situation where there was school vouchers and they're taking their kids out of these schools and they're throwing them in private schools or seminary schools or wherever they want to send them, you'll be lowering the number of students in these classrooms, and it'd be better for these kids because their classroom size will be smaller. They'll benefit in ways that they just don't think about ever.
But at the same time, I feel like that wouldn't be the case because the people who can afford to send their kids and use like vouchers and stuff are probably going to be the kids that are the better students, to where you're going to be left with all like the not as good students all together in the classroom. And if
Potentially.
if you've ever been to a public school, and I mean everyone has, you know the difference between like a kid or classroom with like AP kids and the regular
No,
classroom.
and that's why, like I was saying, you'll have if those kids left the school and they went somewhere
Because
else.
those would be the type of kids that would be leaving the school.
Maybe, maybe not.
I feel like it would be mostly those type of kids. You wouldn't get all of them to leave, but the type of
It
kids.
just depends on their parents.
Yeah.
That's what involved.
I mean, and the thing, and I don't want to get too far off topic talking about education here, but everyone talks about how education starts at the home. And so parents who tend to be like parents that are really invested in their kids' education would be the type of parents that would send them to a private school or like with the vouchers or anything. So those tend to be the kids that do better in school.
So the thing,
anyways.
as I was saying, like, say, yeah, the kids that excel, they left the public school, and then you have less people in the classroom. The
Right.
teacher has more ability to focus on these kids that are suffering as opposed to having keep a track of also the kids that are doing well. That's where kids would benefit even if they stayed in public schools and students were leaving.
And then you'd also, like we said, you'd have a free market of teachers. So good teachers would probably survive in terms of keeping their jobs. Teachers that are bad, that they know are bad, are going to be let go. They're not going to be allowed to stay. And that drives up the quality of teachers as well.
There'll be companies competing for better teachers, so
Yeah.
they'll have to, have better salaries or offer something to the table for them to do better. So I don't know, but I don't know. There's not too much else other I want to talk about with libertarians. We've been going for quite a while, just because it's something we know pretty well. Personally.
Yeah, we've probably spent more time on libertarianism than we will be spending on any other of the topics that we're doing.
Yeah. So we might as well go into the next thing that we want to talk about, which is conservatism, which is going to be very similar, but conservatism is generally what you consider the ideology for the Republican Party. They usually don't believe in drug prohibition as freely as libertarians. Libertarians don't believe in any sort of drug prohibition to where, I mean, there's plenty of conservatives that don't want any drugs legalized. A lot now do agree with marijuana, the majority do, but I don't know. You do see that difference. Another thing with conservatism is it's almost exclusively pro-life. I would like to say that it's exclusively a pro-life
I
stance.
would say it's over 90%
Yeah.
pro-life. You have a few, but they're very low in number.
They also believe in having limited government. They believe that you're endowed by your creator with unalienable rights. There are people that are socially conservative as opposed to libertarians, which are socially liberal. So they believe in things like traditional marriage. Oftentimes they oppose things like gay marriage and the likes. They also have a pretty strong stance on free trade and focusing on free markets, gun rights. They're against affirmative action. They also support school vouchers. There is no concise stance on immigration as far as conservatism goes. I mean, I know plenty of conservatives that, want to give amnesty to all the illegal aliens in this country, and there's plenty of conservatives that don't want to do that whatsoever. But there are more restrictionist immigration viewpoints in conservatism as opposed to libertarianism.
Yeah, definitely so. At least, it does seem like over the last probably, if I had to guess, 2 years, probably ever since about Trump came on the scene, the amount of people on the conservative side who do identify more as let's put more limits on immigration has shot up significantly too. So I feel like what we see today, I'm not sure how it was in like the 80s or 90s, but what we see today in terms of conservatism being the more restrictions on immigration side of the argument is probably the strongest it's been ever.
Yeah. Some other things about not libertarians, conservatism, is that they have a strong focus on strong military, and they're more willing for foreign policy to be interventionist. A lot of people that are conservatives have a strong affinity towards our alliance with Israel and sending aid to Israel and supporting Israel, to where a lot of libertarians don't want us to be involved in the Middle East whatsoever.
And not sending any foreign aid out either.
Not sending any foreign aid. Or, one thing I've heard a lot from conservatives is they want us, that they are interventionists because they want the fighting to be over there as opposed to here. Take it for what it's worth. Any other aspects of conservatism you want to go into? They focus on individualism again, like libertarianism.
I think I would say that, when we're talking about these different political ideologies, there is a lot of overlap between them. For instance, libertarianism and anarcho-capitalism have a lot of overlap. Conservatism and libertarianism have a lot of overlap. Like we said, how libertarians believe in the free market. Conservatives tend to believe in the free market, whereas libertarianisms, a lot of them are actually anarcho-capitalists who don't think government is necessary or who think we shouldn't have a government.
Call things statist.
Whereas conservatives do believe in government, but some libertarians believe in a minarchist government, which is, have it there, be it as small as possible, mostly focused just on, like, defense of the country.
Conservatives are kind of okay with welfare programs to a bigger degree. They're okay with tax existing for the most part.
But at the same time, whereas libertarians would say taxation is theft, conservatives would say let's lower our taxes.
Yeah.
So, it's in the same direction, even though it's not exact. But I think one of the things I did want to hit on here is, they, like we said, they are pro-gun as well, using the same arguments. I would say that conservatives almost, in my personal opinion, their gun arguments tend to be more realistically achievable, whereas a libertarian would have absolutely no problem if a person walked down the street with 6 AK-47s all loaded, safeties off, fully automatic weapons, walking down the middle of the street. As long as you don't shoot anyone, you're fine. Conservatives would be like, yeah, we should probably not have that in our society. You can own it. You can shoot it in, like, a range. You can use it in self-defense if you want, but in terms of, like, open carry, I've seen a lot of conservatives who, although they 100% support the right to self-defense, they do tend to get more on the side of, should we be allowing open carry? Maybe not. Should we allow concealed carry? Yeah. And even then, libertarians would say a person who's like a business owner will have the right to decide whether or not they want guns carried in their establishment. A conservative, on the other hand, would say, some would recognize that, but they would also say, yeah, but you're living in a society, you're living in a country that has the right to bear arms, so you cannot infringe on that, even though you are a private business. So you start to see more government intervention, even though, in a way, conservatives like to be the ones say, we are the small government party, we don't want government intervention in business, and yet you see what did Texas do. Texas passed a law saying that everyone in the state has to honor concealed carry permits. You have to put a giant sign, literally a big freaking sign on the front of your door of your establishment saying that we don't want open carry of handguns in here. Otherwise, if you're in Texas and you haven't your license to open carry, you can open carry wherever you want. Pretty much all public property, almost every business, as long as they don't have a sign that says no open carry. That would be a government intervention in business. And libertarians, although they are pro-gun, would tend to be the ones that saying, yeah, but it's the business's right to decide. Which is hilarious when, you get people like Democrats or liberals who do become very hypocritical when they talk about whether or not government should intervene. And it all comes down to just, what do I believe in and what do I think the government should be doing or not. They try to argue like, oh, I'm arguing on the right of the employer to decide this question. What you're really just doing is saying, I don't like guns, and this is a pro-gun decision. I'm going to take the anti-gun issue, even if that means being hypocritical. And the thing is, a lot of people do that. Conservatives do that, libertarians do that, Democrats do that, liberals do that. Even people on the fringes of both parties, they all do that. And that's one of the things that when you actually get past that, these things make a lot more sense.
Yeah. Some other things as far as conservatism is concerned is they believe that policy is useful in creating incentives to where the libertarians don't want government force in general, so government regulation to any degree is not desirable, which is, to a degree, I like having policy shape behavior. That's why there's things about conservatism I agree with over libertarianism. Also, people that are conservatives, they usually agree with, as far as, freedom of association, they agree with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, to where libertarians don't, because, they don't want forced association, where conservatives are generally more okay with that. Any other things you want to talk about? Conservatism,
no, that was really all I had to talk about for conservatism.
Let's move on to nationalism. Now, to a degree, this is probably what me and you, Bobby, are the most.
Yeah.
I mean, we're elements of several different ideologies. We don't really put ourselves in a box too much about things. But as far as nationalism is concerned, you see things like prioritizing your nation first, such as America first or Britain first or whatever it is. You see exceptionalism, you see your country as something that is exceptional in the world, that you want to preserve your identity and your heritage, your specific country.
Your culture.
Yeah. And you can also see that in immigration, to where you want immigration that is focused on,
making your country better.
Making your
only
country
the best
better.
of the immigrants.
Yeah,
only the best.
Having a standard that you want to enforce. May that be in, you want immigrants that are more assimilable to your country. You want immigrants that are more similar to the people that are already there.
You might want immigrants that speak your language. You might want immigrants that are only skilled in certain areas. Stuff like that.
Yeah. Stuff of that sort. Also, you see things as far as trade, like nationalists aren't as afraid to have the government intervene in the economy, as long as it is good for the average citizen in general, to where, libertarians and conservatives don't want the government getting involved in the economy as much. But you see, especially in trade, nationalists want the nation's interests expressed, and they are willing to put tariffs on goods to support their own industries. And in a nationalist society, you're willing to subsidize your own industries. There's also, less hesitancy towards welfare, because it helps your own citizens.
You mean more of a tendency towards welfare?
You'll even see things as far as like natalist programs in nationalist societies, where, and this is something that we saw with the tax reform bill, you'll say, offer what we do, tax credits for having children. The government subsidizes births in the country because the government prioritizes having families. This is something you see in Russia.
It's what you see the Polish government is doing too. They're telling they want their people to have more children, and so they're pushing policies at the government level, saying, what can we do that will incentivize people to have children?
Israel, to a degree, also has natalist programs, to where they give money to Jewish families having children. So in regards to that, nationalist societies are a lot more collectivist than, conservatives or libertarians. And to a large degree, I'm way more collectivist than most people on the right. I don't think that right or left, as far as collectivism, I don't think it's an inherently leftist thing. It's just how you see politics.
I was going to say, if anything, it's presented nowadays as being more of a leftist viewpoint. So people on the right tend to try to stay away from it, even though they might actually agree with some of the aspects. Some of the things might actually help their argument more. But because it's seen as being a leftist viewpoint, they stray away from it.
As far as like foreign policy, you see a focus on isolationism. They don't want to get involved with other wars because war's not good for the nation. And you also see, a lot of nationalist societies are anti-globalist. They don't want government rule over them from a globalistic standard. So stuff like the United Nations, a nationalist society wouldn't want to be a part of that.
And did you talk about protectionism already?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Any other things on nationalism you want to talk about? There's a big focus on respect for order in nationalistic societies.
And, when it comes to having respect for order, it seems to me that at least once you start getting towards more nationalistic policies, you tend to have more social standards that aren't necessarily laws. But,
or maybe set towards customs to how people behave in general.
And so behavior that's not within the customs is shunned by the people. And that go in, you can have a million different examples of what that might actually mean.
Say, in China, there's different social mores in China as opposed to the United States. China's a lot more nationalistic as to where, the United States takes in people from different cultures from all over. So in China, there'll be rules set more towards how they've always behaved because they're a more homogenous people.
And also, you have to remember that in nationalist societies, there tends to also be, as we said, when you're putting your nation first, there tends to be more of, a lot more respect for nation. You do see people with,
it's a big part
the
of who
flag
you
of your
are.
country is openly everywhere. People are proud to wave it. They're proud to stand up for their country. They're proud to say, I am American, I am German, I am Canadian, whatever you happen to be. They're proud of that. They'll proudly fly their flag. You have people, nowadays in societies where you try to fly your country's flag and they're like, oh, that's offensive to immigrants. Yeah. No, in a nationalist society, it'd be like, why don't you have a flag up on your door, Billy? I'm not going to force you to put it up necessarily, but, stuff like that, like, oh, everyone else is doing this, I should do it too. It's a cultural custom.
Yeah.
And those are followed a lot more so in nationalist societies than other societies like the one we live in.
Yeah. There's a bigger emphasis on respect towards the nation because it's all of us. Other than that, there's not really much I also want to talk about nationalism. Want to move on to liberalism?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Liberalism, this is now the first kind of leftist ideology to a degree we're talking about. Definitely not something we are, but it's something that's important to understand. I think one of the big things that you need to understand about liberalism is it's about getting past nationalism, the stuff that we just mentioned. They want to focus more on the free movement of labor and goods. So immigration in a liberalist society is a lot more open, laissez-faire. They want people coming in because they want to see, the inflow, as I just said, goods and labor. They want to. They see they don't have any sort of cynical view on immigration. It's a positive to them.
Yeah, what they're trying to bring in really though is, as you said, like cheaper labor. A lot of it comes down to that, and there's a reason why big companies like Walmart or,
Which, like, more immigrants is good for your GDP in a sense.
In a way, yes.
It isn't the final thing, but if you have more immigrants coming in, your GDP will go up.
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, it reaches the point where more immigrants drives your GDP down because you have to pay for those people via any welfare type programs. So when people say, oh, every immigrant rises the GDP, that is true to a degree. You reach a tip and a breaking point, however. And the problem is we understand that we're not too far away from that. And that if you continue with current immigration standards to the United States or even, even into Europe, it's reaching unsustainable levels. And so liberals wouldn't really be worried about that. What they'd be worried about is we need to make sure that our products that we buy at Walmart, our iPhones, stay cheap. So I'm okay with you shipping the labor over to China for it because it's cheaper to make over there. Therefore, it's cheaper to buy over here. A nationalist would say, why are you sending our jobs away from us? Keep our jobs here. These are our jobs, not their jobs. We invented this. We can make it. Whereas a liberal might not say that. They'd be like, yeah, but, it's better over there. So...
Or, in a nationalistic society, you want immigration that won't depress wages.
Right.
To where in a liberal society...
That's the whole point, is to depress wages.
Yeah. So some other parts of liberalism is there's a lifelong focus on education. They believe that the government should be heavily involved with education, should be robustly funded. To the degree a lot of them want free college or vocational schools. They're also pro-choice. It's pretty much exclusively how they are on the abortion thing. A woman's right to choose her body, her choice. That goes along with things such as feminism. They're big supporters of feminism. Socially liberal, so they support, the legalization of at least marijuana to the most degrees, but also some other drugs oftentimes. Homosexual rights. They believe in affirmative action. I believe that, the Civil Rights Act is needed. As far as freedom of association, you can't discriminate against people because that's wrong. They also support a minimum wage. They often want to increase the minimum wage.
To make it a living wage.
Yeah. They want businesses to be required to, pay people a certain degree. They have strong focuses on trade unions. They want workers to collectivize and bargain for themselves. It's a big focus on equality and secularism. They don't want any sort of government influence by religion. Any other things about liberalism you feel that kind of articulates it?
I mean, I guess we could go by just like reasonings behind these. If you notice, a lot of these things, such as socialized healthcare, government-funded education,
bigger welfare
state, you have a lot more government spending, and along with that comes higher taxation as well, many times, which I don't think we actually went here to mention. And that in a liberal society, there is higher taxation.
Yeah.
And they're openly saying it's to pay for the bottom rungs of society, or
and some
it is
people
to pay for
are okay
people's
with that.
Yeah, and a lot of people are okay with that. And that's why you start to see, a lot of these different ideologies that we have are mixtures of a lot of these different ideas. Like, for instance, in a libertarian society, it would be like, no, we shouldn't be have government funded anything because that would require taking money away from other people in order to pay for other people. Therefore, it is theft. Therefore, it is violence being used because they're stealing your property. In a liberal society, it would be like, yeah, we're going to tax you because we need to pay for your health care. Whereas in or we believe, liberals saying, we believe that a woman has a right to choose. That's almost 100% believed by them. You look at conservatives, it's, we tend to be more pro-life, and that's probably about 90% of them. Like I said, you go to libertarians, it's almost split 50-50 on that sort of issue. So some of these have overlap and some of them don't.
And for everyone it's going to be different, because I'm a very nationalistic person, but I'm pro-choice. There's things about liberalism that I agree with, that I don't take issue with, that most people on the right do. And
the thing is, no one is ever exactly 100% something.
Yeah.
You can agree with different ideologies, and that's kind of the reason why there is so much overlap. Is there are people who said, I don't agree with everything that this ideology stands for, but I agree with 70% of it, and I agree with the other 30% of this one over here. Wait a minute. Here's the one that I found that's almost 90% what I believe in, because it's a mixture of the two. And we kind of see that with different policies. So just because, let's say a nationalist society can still have, free healthcare systems. Because you say, that would benefit our society.
As opposed, these are positive rights we're talking about.
Exactly.
You're entitled to tangible things like healthcare or education, which libertarians are 100% against.
Yeah. So, you have a lot of that there, and I think you mentioned environmentalism, too.
I didn't, but
you didn't. But environmentalism is a big thing of liberalism, where, you look at, conservatives tend to be, maybe not so truly, but
they feel that there's too many intrusive environmentalist regulations.
I'm trying to word this correctly, but whereas libertarians would be like, you can do whatever you want with your own property. That doesn't necessarily mean you can pollute it, because if you own part of the upstream and you pollute it and then it's dirty downstream, you've now harmed the property of somebody else.
Yeah.
Whereas conservative, not that they're going to pollution the environment, rights. But at the same time, conservatives would be like, maybe we should be free to let these companies kind of, do a little bit more. Okay, if they pollute, fine them. Whereas liberals would be saying, you can't do this, you can't pollute this at all. Yeah. Republicans, conservatives might be more like, you can do whatever you want, but just, if you pollute, you're going to pay a fine. Here's an incentive to not pollute via, fines and regulation, or, fines, essentially. Liberals just be like, you're not doing this at all.
Yeah, and it plays into, liberals are much more accepting of regulations, for the environment or the economy. They have a cynical view of corporations and their connection to the environment.
Right. And it also goes into look at what we talked about, nationalism. You can have environmentalism and nationalism together, because they might feel This is our country. It's our beautiful mountains, our beautiful rivers. We should not be polluting them. That necessarily isn't a liberal or a conservative viewpoint, because you're looking at what's best for the nation. If what's best for your nation is to, I want to preserve and make it beautiful, you wouldn't want pollution. You want to have more environmentalism. So like I said, as you listen to all of us talk about these different viewpoints, understand that you can have mixtures of difference in both.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily say, well, I believe in all this, but I don't believe in that aspect. Does that mean I'm not this? It just means, no, you're just, more this on this one issue. And there might actually be one that is out there and fits you better. We'll just, you'll have to really look at what these things are on and what you believe in.
Yeah.
So I don't really have anything else to say about liberalism per se for myself.
Let's go into the next one. This is something a little more interesting because I don't think people are as educated on it. It's something that I used to consider myself, regrettably, and that's an anarcho-capitalist, anarcho-capitalism.
Do you still have your anarcho-capitalist flag?
I do not. I did receive a couple years back an anarcho-capitalist flag for my birthday, but I don't know where it is.
Well, if you ever find that, maybe what we could
It'd
do
be
is
funny
have an
to
entire
fly-
show talking about anarcho-capitalism in detail, like we did for the paleo-conservative episode, but just have that thing
And I
hanging
could
right
probably
here.
do it because I know my anarcho-capitalism pretty extensively.
So,
but-
well, that being said, how about we just get into it then?
Yeah, so anarcho-capitalism, it also goes by the name of voluntarism or yellow and black anarchism. It also, as similar to libertarianism, there's a lot of crossover. The joke is, what is a libertarian? What is a anarcho-capitalist? Someone who's been a libertarian for 6 months. But anarcho-capitalists do not believe in a state that, since the government violates the non-aggression principle through its monopoly on force, the only ethical standard is that for a stateless society based on property rights and the non-aggression principle. Now, a lot of ways, because anarcho-capitalism hasn't existed ever, it's all in the hypothetical.
Like we said, these are theories.
Yeah. For my understanding of how an anarcho-capitalist society would work, it would be a contractual society. So, say there's a city that is an anarcho-capitalist city, that if I want to go live in that society, I have to have a contract with the city, which would probably be a private corporation. Well, it would be a private corporation. Because if you didn't have a government, say the United States became one anarcho-capitalist society, all of the government-controlled property would go up for sale. And it wouldn't be, for the most part at least, what a lot of libertarians or anarcho-capitalists believed, where I'm going to have my property and it's going to be my rules. For the most part, people with capital means will buy up all the property in society. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, if you don't like the rules or the requirements, or this is the tax rate, or this is how we run things in this society,
you're free to move.
You're free to go anywhere else. There is a freedom as far as immigration is concerned. It's based on property rights. If someone's willing to have you, you're allowed to be there.
At the same time, if someone's not willing to have you, you better get out of there fast.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they have the right to do pretty much whatever they want to you, as long as you're not leaving their property.
So yeah, as I said before, an anarcho-capitalist society, it's a stateless society. Everything is completely privatized. That is the roads, that is the schools, that is your police system.
And keep in mind, that doesn't necessarily mean that these things will disappear. Some of those might get better. Now, the question is, the joke that a lot of people always use to, make libertarianism look bad was the whole "who will build the roads" argument. Well, I'm going to use anarcho-capitalism more so than libertarianism, even though because there is a lot of overlap. Let's say all of a sudden it wasn't your tax money is going to pay for the roads. What happens to the roads? Well, say you have a Walmart, okay? Walmart wants people there to conduct business. They need roads for customer service. If they notice that the pothole right near the end, there's a pothole in the road right near the entrance, something tells me that Walmart is going to say, people are, they might injure their cars doing this. It's not safe. People don't like to drive on bad roads. I have an incentive, again, that whole incentive thing. You have an incentive to say, I should fix this road here. Or let's say you're building a Walmart and you say, how do people get here? I have, an interest in building the entire road from the main street to where I'm at. And there is going to be some private company that might say, I think this area should have a road connecting these two places. I think it would go here. And then what that person's going to do is he's going to go to every single person who owns property in that area, or who owns their property, and says, here's my idea between, I think that this city and this city should have a road connecting them. You own property. Are you okay with me building it in this location that I've probably already driven up got blueprints for? And they'll probably say yeah or no. And if you can get enough people to say yes, and those people would probably, you would probably have people that if they own property that's just out in the middle of nowhere and someone wants to build a road, you'd probably have a private company. Because think about it, if you're a company that makes roads, you're only going to stay in business by making roads. So what do you got to do? You got to find areas where roads can exist. But if people don't let you build on their property, you're not going to be able to build roads. So what you have to do is you have to pay them.
It's good for them to have these roads for them too on their
because people probably won't agree with that unless they get paid.
Having a road increases your property value.
Yeah, exactly. And so even though you have stuff like that, and again, you probably have an agreement between the company that makes the road or whatever company is overseeing the road to be like, you got to keep up with this thing. You're allowed to come on my property for that section of the road, or I'll even sell you, the property of the road and then 10 feet on either side.
Or
and then you can do whatever you want with that.
What I've seen proposed is, in an anarcho-capitalist society, the roads are privatized. There's owners to these roads. Who's to say that private ownership is automatically worse than the government? Okay, how we have it currently in the United States is the government sets laws for the roads, but in anarcho-capitalist society, they can change it however they please.
Yeah.
Say they want the speed limit to be higher. Say they want to subsidize the road by having toll roads. Say they want to subsidize it by having advertisements. They'll be able to at least to choose around it, and to where in the United States we have a lot of problems with fatalities on highways. Who's to say that they won't want an incentive to have the deaths on their highway or road lowered? So they'll look into ways to actually fix that, to where the government, through having an insured supply of money through taxpayers, won't do so.
Obviously this isn't going to happen, but imagine that all of a sudden all government in the United States just disappeared, or let's say, we were brought up as this whole a anarcho-capitalist society. You're going to have monopolies. Monopolies are going to exist. You're going to have a company that's going to buy another company, and it's going to do that. And what happens when you have almost an entire city that's controlled by this one company? You're going to have, corporate control of areas. That's going to happen. You're going to have the one rich guy who buys up a bunch of property and essentially becomes a king. It's almost, monarchistic in a way. Because what it comes down to, I've said this, is incentives and, mutual interest, really.
Yeah.
Because everything comes down to, if I want something to get done that requires, the input of other people, or I want to build something on someone else's property, you have to have it in the better interest of both people in order to do so.
It needs to be desirable. It's not a given that things are going to go to you.
Because this thing also comes back to free market. So let's say you have Joe's road construction company, and he says, I want to build a road right here. I want to build a highway between these two places. I've gotten the permission from these people. I've bought land from them to build a highway. Well, I now control the highway. Or let's say I was building it for Walmart. Let's say Walmart sponsored 10 miles of an interstate. Okay? They now have an incentive to make sure that interstate is clean. There's no potholes. They want to make it as safe as possible. If they wanted to, they could charge tolls. At the same time, you have the right to say, I don't want to drive on your new highway here if I have to pay a toll. Now, sometimes you're going to get forced in a situation where it's yeah, you have to. But at the same time, if your tolls are too high, people just aren't going to go. People aren't going to drive on your highway. And so you have, again, an incentive to lower tolls. So, you can go back and forth in this sort of stuff for hours and hours and hours, though.
Yeah. I think with that, because anarcho-capitalism, it's so hypothetical, and I know how to make the arguments for it. It's not me saying that this is something that I believe in, really, but...
Yeah, and I'm just giving examples of how things would work in a given situation as well.
But I think with that we could move into the next thing, which
Okay.
is not Georgism,
No, we had Georgism next on the list, but
but it's
not covering that.
it's fascism,
Uh-huh.
which is a little fun because fascism, it's on the rise again.
It's
on the
everywhere.
rise
Oh my
again.
God.
It's everywhere. So we're actually going to go into what fascism is. Fascism is an anti-democratic, dictatorial state, a collectivist totalitarian state. In terms of violence, we've been talking about the non-aggression principle. A fascist state uses violence to facilitate its desires as far as the nation is concerned. Fascist societies are imperialistic. They're okay with, as far as foreign policy is concerned, with expansionist, foreign policy, which is not something that we can even really comprehend so much in the United States. But, there are societies where taking territory is an agreed upon thing.
We used to be like that.
At least in the past, it used to be more like that.
The last probably about 50 or 60 years has not been that way, but it used to be like that here in the United States.
Also, in fascist societies, you see corporatism. You see the merger of the state with corporations, them working together. You also see a lot of state economic intervention, and you'll see a lot of nationalization of industries. You look at potentially the only true example of fascism was Benito Mussolini's Italy. There was extensive requirements on quotas on how factories are supposed to produce things. These are the required prices set by the state. This is not a free market system whatsoever.
No.
And to that degree, fascist societies, in terms of trade, it's really on a per basis case. A lot of nations will say, we don't want anything to do with a fascist society. We're not going to trade with you. We're going to put economic sanctions on you, to where other states are okay with it. So, I feel like that's a pretty good descriptor of fascism. The thing about fascism is it's not an ideology we have actually seen much of. A lot of people only believe it's something that, could be described to the interwar period between the First and Second World War. Maybe the only examples we can really talk about is Mussolini's Italy, Franco's Spain. That's about it. But fascism is it's a reactionary movement. It's often like a reversion to a traditionalist order, as opposed to, they often have fears towards socialism or communism, and they're fighting against those elements in their society and suppressing it with state violence.
Yeah, and that really comes down to it is the whole state violence thing, because whereas in the U.S. it'll be like, oh, if you get caught breaking this one law, we're going to fine you. Whereas some laws might be the case in their fascist society. You break this law, we're killing you. We're going to send in police officers, we're going to send in military, whatever, and if you're breaking this rule, that's it for you, it's over. You see a lot more of that, or at least, the threat of state violence against you. A lot more coercion, I should say, under a fascist society than in a other type of society. So,
yeah. So I think with that we can move into the next topic, which we're going to talk about now: socialism, communism, things of those sorts.
and the different aspects of each.
Yeah, the different types and aspects. And, I'm not a socialist. I'm not a communist. I've read things on these. I'm not going to pass judgment on these stances. I'm just going to try and describe them to what I know of them. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is democratic socialism, the Bernie Sanders kind of viewpoint on it. The social democracy, that's another term for it, things that we see more often in modern Europe. A society where the society and the economy is run democratically is, for what I've seen definition-wise, the most basic understanding of what democratic socialism is. There is strong controls over corporations. It's a collectivist society. There's, to a large part, economic central planning, so the government has a invested stake in the economy. It's going to be taking control. It's going to be telling businesses what you can and can't do to a strong degree. There's a big focus on a welfare state. The state has, a vested interest in its people, so it focuses on, as again, we're talking about positive rights, it's going to focus on socialized health care, through universal single-payer health care. You're going to see free education, things of those sorts. A big focus on equality. They're usually socially liberal societies. Nationalized child care, you'll often see a big focus on trade unions because the socialism aspect of it. A big focus on environmentalism. I don't know, anything else about democratic socialist societies that come to mind, Bobby?
I mean, just, the fact that we have probably our most famous democratic socialist in the United States as everyone's favorite former Democrat nominee for president.
Bernie Sanders.
Yes. Always pushing democratic socialism, or at least his idea of it.
It was fun when he was running because obviously I didn't agree with Bernie Sanders whatsoever, but I was around a lot of people that supported him, and I would go to the meetings and I would go to the parties for it. Strange time in my life, yeah. But I got to understand it very personally, what the people believe in and their stances on it. And personally, I see the flaws in some of these things, but they're true believers through and through. And oftentimes I feel like people that are democratic socialists, they believe in the best in everyone in society, and everyone deserves to have an investment in them because everyone has potential to do great things, to where, people on the right or in capitalist societies, you're advocating for an unequal society. I think that's what you need to state. You think that this should be based on merit, to where, in a democratic socialist society, it's based on universal care for everyone.
Yeah, everyone has the right to receive these things, no matter who they are, no matter what they do. Oh, you don't have a house? We're going to make sure that you have
rights to housing.
That you live in, whether it be a house
no
or
discrimination.
Yeah,
whatsoever.
No discrimination. It doesn't matter if you're white, black, Hispanic, whatever. It doesn't matter if you're man, female, cross-gendered, whatever. You have the right to free housing, so you might live in a, even if it's something like, government housing, like Section 8 type stuff. You have the right to the basic that. You have a right to a basic income. You have a right to the welfare state. You have a right to free health care. You have a right to free education. So again, along with that does come, as we said before, a lot higher taxation. And
usually very high taxes.
And that's part of the reason why I think that wouldn't work so well in the United States, is because there is a big aspect on the collectivist ideas, whereas, the whole everybody has the right to these things, no matter who they are, whatever. In the United States, we do tend to be a more individualistic society, a lot more so than at least Europe. So when it comes to some of these ideas, you do have a lot of pushback from everyday people here.
Where you usually see democratic, socialistic societies, the Bernie Sanders people would always point to Denmark, which doesn't actually define itself as a democratic, socialistic society. They see themselves as a free market society with, social programs. But, to the examples that they point to, it often works better for them because they're small societies. They don't have to focus on large expenditure on these separate things.
And, one of the things people also forget about
and they're usually homogenous nations,
yeah.
too. So people see it as, oh, I'm investing in our own.
Yeah, whereas, in the United States, it's like, I don't care about other people that are around me. Why should I want to pay higher taxes to make sure that they're taken care of? You don't really have that in the United States. So again, you wind up with a lot of pushback to those ideas. But what I was going to talk about was the fact that you have in one of those societies, because of the fact that you have actually I lost my train of thought. Sorry. If I remember it, I'll let you know.
Yeah. When we talk about, obviously, democratic socialism as understood in the United States is heavily influenced by Bernie Sanders. I've read About half of Bernie Sanders' book, Our Revolution. Even though I'm a right-wing person, I'm interested. And, a lot of these policies that he talked about as a mayor, he enacted in Burlington, Vermont, and it was actually very successful. And
I remember what I was going to say.
He was able to get a lot of even Republicans on his side. And as far as democratic socialism is concerned, I do think it can work on very small scales.
And that was the point that I was actually...
socialized healthcare in the United States, the numbers are too large.
That's exactly the point that I was going to bring up, is you have these countries that have, like, populations of, less than the size of New York City as their entire population of their country. Also, what they don't have to do, even though they do have higher taxes, is because a lot of those countries are in NATO, they don't have to worry about having large militaries.
No.
The United States has the largest military in the world. Our government spending on our military is both the highest number and the highest percentage in the entire world. A lot of times the reason is because we are over there. We have bases all over Europe. We are protecting these countries. Yeah. We are subsidizing their own national defense through ours. They don't have to worry about paying that off. They have to, obviously you're going to have some sort of military, and you're going to have some spending that goes along with that, but not this massive thing like we have today. And part of that, I think, is the United States' problem, and we should be cutting back on that. But at the same time, those countries don't have to pay for those things. If all of a sudden you have to pay for your own national defense, then the question of, should everybody really get everything 100% for free healthcare-wise, or should we, maybe fund our army a little bit more so that our ports can get, or, maybe fund our navy so that our waters aren't left open. And maybe fund our army so our borders aren't, anyone can just walk over it.
And how a lot of democratic socialistic nations handle this is they have compulsory national service. So, maybe I don't want to go to the military, although that's an option, but at least I have to do something in the public service. Maybe I have to be an apprentice towards teaching, or I have to work in the post office, or something of that sort. But they see it as a positive thing that they're willing to sacrifice for the nation. But, in a lot of societies that are democratic socialist, in the past, at least, you didn't see a big influx of immigration there because it was based around their homogeneous society. And you see when they've, as such as Denmark has done, or Sweden to a degree, they cut back on their willingness to give out these programs because the people entering the society don't really feel a need to pay into the system when it's already a given that this is given to them. And for a lot of people in the third world where it's automatically better, what's the incentive to work? That's the big problem with democratic socialist societies. What's the incentive to be productive when these things are such a given? It messes with the incentives that's just so different than what
and
we're
you
used
lead to problems like what's going on in Sweden, where they've talked about they're actually going to be raising the retirement age to pay for the welfare of the migrants that they brought in. They're considering doing that. I think they said they're going to be doing that. At least they were considering doing that.
At least
what's the incentive of those people to work? Why? And you're now being told, by the way, you can't retire for another 2 years because you got to pay for these people. There is pushback. We're already seeing there.
As we mentioned,
so you run into problems like that when in democratic socialism and other societies that have large welfare states that don't discriminate against who gets it.
And Bernie Sanders actually understands this to a degree. Like, he isn't for open borders. Like, he sees it as like a Koch brothers thing. This is a conservative thing. They want open borders, cheap labor. He understands that, like, you do need scarcity towards labor to help the workers. But there's not too much other about democratic socialism I want to get into. Kind of a more controversial subject.
Yeah, we're going to get to it. The next two are pretty controversial.
Yeah, so the next political ideology we want to get into is National Socialism, or, you might know it as Nazism, Nazi Germany. What are the things that National Socialism believes? They believe in racial collectivism. So they're collectivists, but it's based around their race, their kind, their ethnicity, however you describe it. There's a belief in elitism. It's about aspiring to get to the top, and it's about rewarding the people that get to the top. Those are the natural rulers. And with that, you have a inherently anti-democratic dictatorial state, but they see by giving everyone an option with democracy, the common man might not know what's best for the society. At least that's how they see it in such a state. They believe in, you need to be an example for your race or your people. There's a strong focus on God. There's a rejection of decadence, much more traditionalist and socially conservative to a stronger degree than even we see with social conservatives today for the most part. Expansionist foreign policy. Our people need more land to settle. We saw this with the Lebensraum with Nazi Germany. People come before the economy. I've read Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler's book, because I recommend it. If you have any sort of interest in history, just read it. It's a very interesting book. It's one of the most famous books of all time. It's interesting. One thing he says is Hitler feels that he didn't make National Socialism as an ideology, as it's something he discovered as a natural way of life that can be applied to how you guide a people. And he saw his people, the Germans, as a unified people, for better or for worse.
And what a lot of people get wrong about National Socialism especially is, granted, there is a lot of, racial hierarchy.
Yeah, it's openly racial.
It is openly racial, but it's racially collective, as you'd say. So, granted, there is a lot of my race is better than other races. What it's based off of is what's best for my race.
Yeah.
So you have in National Socialism, you still have that nationalist factor. You have that whole, I am proud to be what I am. I'm proud to be my race. I'm proud to be from my country because my countrymen are my race. That is me. That is my culture.
For better or for worse, these are
my people. So when you have that whole, I want to take care of my people, I don't really care about anybody else, that's when you have, I'm okay with having, my stuff paid for via high taxation to get free college or free healthcare or whatnot.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have that nationalist standpoint of what's best for my country, what's best for my race, what's best for my people does come first. And that, when we were talking about libertarianism, everything kind of goes through the filter of the non-aggression principle. In National Socialism, everything goes through the filter of what's best decision for my race. What would make my country, my people better? And that's what National Socialism is based off of.
Hitler saw it as an extension of the Nationalist Socialist state is an extension of the organic family of the race or the people at large. Again, for better or for worse, how you see this.
And so, we have a bullet here, people before economy. Like in the United States, we care about having things like high GDP. Yeah. We talked about how is the whole thing, does every immigrant raise your GDP? Is that true or false? We said, yes, it is true to a degree until you reach a breaking point. National Socialism would be saying, if this person isn't going to help my race, why should I let them in, immigration-wise?
Why should I let them in if they'll take a job from someone of my race?
I don't want to lose a job. Or government spending. You say, okay, where can we maximize helping our people out? We don't have any incentive to help out other people. So we're not, you might be, let's say you had a National Socialist society of white people and there was a black person living there. They're probably not going to want to pay for anything that person does.
They wouldn't let them
So they wouldn't let that person even be in there. So, you do, but when it comes to people before economy, like I said, the U.S. would care about having a higher GDP. A National Socialist society wouldn't really care about GDP growth numbers. What they care about is
economics is secondary.
As far as economics goes in National Socialism, really comes down to the efficiency of government.
Things like capitalism or socialism or communism, these are materialistic ideologies. Stuff like National Socialism is not. It's based more on physical people.
Right.
And one of the misconceptions about National Socialism that I just wish people understood more to history is it's not a conception of, oh, we're a master race. Hitler, he had alliances with people of many different countries, Asians, Africans, Arabs. It's just, I am a National Socialist. This is my race. This is my people that I'm focused on.
And a lot of National Socialists do believe that everybody should be, in terms of like every other country, because it like theoretically say every country was National Socialist, and every country would look out for their people.
Yeah.
You're still going to have things like trade with other nations. If you don't have the resources to make your people better, you're going to seek those resources. What you don't want to do is hurt your own people in the process. So you'd have an incentive against warfare, which is funny, in a way, because we're talking about how expansionist they are. In a way, you can have a nationalist socialist society where peace among nations occurs. If you put your people, if everyone's on the same playing field of war, I want to make sure my people benefit, I want to make sure my people benefit, how can we benefit each other? We may like each other, we may not.
I think one thing that you can find from National Socialism that kind of is it disengages itself from the world, that does cause problems, though, is when you view your society as only my race, my people. It becomes purely us versus them.
Yes.
And it's easy to get us to see ourselves as, we need to take something from these other people, which is
or to believe these people have harmed us in some way. They've taken something from us. We should go get it back.
Yeah, there's collective grievances.
We should make them pay us back. Quote air quotes on that. Whether that be theft of land, warfare, genocide, even does occur. So you can take that to many, many different degrees.
So I think I don't have anything else on National Socialism. As we said, it's pretty much only been done in Nazi Germany or VC France, I guess you could say, to a degree. But the next thing we want to go into is communism. One of the last big political ideologies of the 20th century that we saw fall. And communism, or Marxism, invented by Karl Marx, is, if you could break it down to one single thing Marx said, is it's an abolition of private property. There is no such thing as private property. This is a dictatorship of the proletariat. So it's about class warfare. There is the bourgeoisie and there is the proletariat. And then there's also the petty bourgeoisie, which is like a step below the bourgeoisie. But the bourgeoisie is, say, your 1%, your rich people. And they are exploiting the proletariat, the workers. We need to have worker class consciousness and see ourselves as workers to rise up and overthrow the bourgeoisie so we can, establish collective control of the means of production and, give on to each other as to what we need. As opposed to in a capitalist society, they see, the private ownership of the means of production as a means to exploit workers through they usually describe this through like surplus value theory. So like a worker in a factory makes something worth $20, but he only gets a wage of like $5. The $15 is what, at least to a communist, is seen as theft from the worker, because they see labor is entitled to the product of its, efforts. But in communism, there's a focus on the greater good. Obviously, it's a collectivist society. There's a focus on a new man, that once we get past capitalism, we can get into a world where workers work because it is something that they desire to make. Kind of a strange concept in a sense, but since you lose the capitalistic inhibitions over you, you'll have a desire to create wealth just because it's something you want to do.
Yeah.
One thing that, someone that comes from a capitalistic viewpoint on some things that I've always, is a critique of communism or socialism, is the economic calculation problem, where, in a communist society, everything is centrally planned. There is no such thing as a market whatsoever. The government controls all flows of resources. So I kind of want to take it to a hypothetical where, I can pose this better. When we went into Iraq in 2003, we destroyed the government state whatsoever. We took control as the United States, and we were in control of the national industries of that nation. And for a while, and this is one of the problems we had as, our intervention in Iraq, we're in control of these industries. How do we designate where these things go? Where there's no feedback mechanisms as far as prices are concerned in a free market, how do you know to send 100 barrels of gasoline to Fallujah or you send that to Baghdad? How do you know, it's best that we create 1,000 steaks as opposed to 1,000 packages of chicken breast? You don't know because there's no public feedback mechanism from the people at large. And I've presented this, because I've known communists, this issue to them, and they have no idea how to respond and fix this problem. The best I've ever heard is, we'll have computers to deal with this. But yeah, that's probably my strongest critique on communism. I can imagine you don't have good things to say about communism either.
No, I don't at all. And one of the things that I was, what I was thinking about when it comes to communism versus other things is, both, look at communism versus like National Socialism. Both of them are like, very big government, and a lot of them are, let's say, big welfare states. You even have that in democratic socialism, but for many, many different reasons. And I just wanted to point out that a lot of people confuse different ideologies because of the fact that they believe in the same things, but the differences between why they believe that versus something else is really where political ideologies are actually formed. And so I just want people to point that out whenever people might, say like, well, communism believes this and you believe this too. It's like, yeah, but I have it for many different reasons. Here they are, X, Y, and Z. I just want to point that out right now before, anyone else starts any discussions based off of anything. In the future, when you're talking about different political ideologies, make sure you know that.
Yeah. So I guess I can go into some of the differences that we see in communism as far as, the different kinds of communism. I think the two biggest distinctions that you can get in communism is internationalist communism and communism in one nation. Wherever communism has been attempted, it's been different for whichever society it is. So Marxist-Leninist communism or Trotskyist communism, these are internationalist communist ideologies, which means that they want the workers of the world to unite. We are all in this together. It's not just about my country. It's about us and the workers of all the world getting together to liberate ourselves from the bourgeoisie. It sounds
very similar to the whole race and ethnicity factor of National Socialism, where instead of it saying, this is my race, this is my people, it's these are the poor. I am the poor. These are the workers. They are like me, and so they get past that whole race aspect of the issue of it.
It's class collectivism.
Yes.
It's based on where you are in society in terms of economic class. We would be considered part of the proletariat because we don't have the means of production. We don't own a factory. The petty bourgeoisie will be someone that, say, owns a business.
Yeah. And so, you're still going to have some sort of business ownership in a Marxist-Leninist society, except the business would be owned by the government or someone who the government has allowed to do something. And whereas they will make rules that say you cannot do X, Y, and Z because it is unfair to the worker, or it will take advantage of the worker. You look at something like National Socialism, they might have the same policy, except they'll be saying you need to pay them X, you need to pay them at least this amount of money, therefore, because that's good for our people and we don't want our people to be poor. Or, you need to have such and such safety type regulation here because under Marxist-Leninism, it would be because this is what is fair for our workers, whereas National Socialism might have the exact same thing, but to say this is what is fair for our people or for our race or for our countrymen. But what ends up actually happening is, let's say you have like a factory. In National Socialism, you can still have a market. You can still have people that are buying and selling goods.
There is some
Whereas
enterprise.
there is some enterprise, except it's not necessarily.
If it goes against the people,
if it goes against the people, or if the state
back.
deems it as going against the people, it will be taken out. Under Marxist-Leninism, you don't have that because it is the state that is, the state owns the factory. You work at the factory. Whereas under, something like National Socialism, Joe owns the factory. You work for Joe. And the state has control over what Joe's allowed to do, rather than Joe is the state.
So one thing about Marxist-Leninism that I want to talk about is the focus on the creation of a revolutionary vanguard. So people that consider themselves Marxist-Leninists want to create a intellectual vanguard which will lead the proletariat in the violent revolution of the overthrow of the bourgeoisie, which they see as reasonable. So people that consider themselves Marxist-Leninists are people that see themselves as leaders of the movement. Not everyone would see themselves as such. And, one thing that communism focuses on is seeing nationalism and religion as false consciousness. These are the opioids of the masses. These are something that the capitalists have given us to keep us from rebelling, giving us a sense of, oh, well, I'm not united with the workers in that country because I don't like that country, as opposed to I hate that country actually because it's the capitalists in my own country that are exploiting me, and I'm just not seeing that. Or, religion is just something given to me to occupy me on Sundays so I don't revolt against the bourgeoisie. Things of that nature. Atheistic, you could see communism to a great degree. I don't think I've ever met a religious communist.
I certainly have not.
There's differences in communism through what we've seen through history. So there's things like Stalinism, obviously referring to communism under Joseph Stalin, which is very different, which was more communism in a nation, more like nationalistic communism. It wasn't focused on eroding the Russian sense of the nation away. It was communism based on being Russian. And, there's a subordination of foreign interests over the nation, and that includes foreign workers. Also, you see things under Stalinism is there's state violence against the bourgeoisie class and the lumpen proletariat, which is the proletariat that sides with the capitalistic class. So if you are a worker that sides with the capitalist bourgeoisie class, in a Stalinist society, the government uses violence against you, and you might say be taken in the middle of the night by a secret police or thrown in a gulag, or you'll be shot. This happened a lot under Stalin. It's an authoritarian society.
It seems it's the most authoritarian so far.
Everything's centrally planned. Also, another example of a more nationalistic version of communism in one nation, is Maoism. Mao Zedong in China, the other kind of big example of communism that still, largely exists to this day, which was more of a focus on how peasants should be the bulwark of the revolution by leading the working class. It was a focus on, the peasants as opposed to the judges in traditionalist Confucianism Chinese society. The Chinese society for centuries has been focused on a bureaucratic class that rules over the society, and under Maoism it was a rejection of that.
Yeah, I haven't really studied Maoism too much myself. as opposed to some other types and forms of communism. So, yeah, that's really.
But yeah, one thing that was also important to Maoism is the sense of permanent revolution. It's a pursuit of class interests with no compromise. That we are always fighting against the bourgeoisie. There can be no alliances made with these people. We always need to use the state to stop them. Otherwise, they will upend our society. So, a lot of people were killed under Maoism. There's a stronger focus on Maoism on destruction than construction. There's a lot of destruction of old religious iconography under Maoism because, again, religion is an opiate of the mass used by the capitalistic class to enslave the proletariat to what they believe in.
Guess we can go to the next one then.
Yeah. The Trotskyism, it's not too different from Marxist-Leninism. Trotskyism was, the ideology that Stalin faced, and Trotskyism was more of an internationalist version of capitalism. It focused more on worker self-management and worker mass democracy. So within the factories, the workers will vote on how they want production to go. There's no such thing as the boss or the
And I'm
manager.
assuming that would be, factory by factory.
Yeah.
Or or business by business, I should say.
Since the means of production are commonly owned, the workers there are the ones that make the decisions on how the business goes.
In that regard, you would not be able to have you probably would not be able to have corporations. You probably wouldn't be able to you wouldn't have businesses that would expand into, let's say, a second location. Because once you get to the point where it's okay, well, if the workers are all voting together but they're deciding for the company as a whole, that is a corporation at that point. That's just a worker-owned corporation, which essentially is, you have large aspects of that today, except, instead of having worker, it's owner-owned, and, the workers are free to own shares in their own company, and then they elect a board of directors who makes decisions. There, instead, it would be individuals, and you might be able to have instances where it was, workers from 2 or 3 different companies or 2 or 3 different, let's say, towns that all work in the same type of thing would make decisions that would affect each other if it was the same owner per se. But then, you might have an instance where it is the state that is owning it anyways, so it's the individual workers. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what if, business A, business B, business C are all in the same, quote-unquote company, I guess we could use the word, but they want to run things differently, then they would run things differently. They would have their own individual decisions. So you wouldn't have, corporations or anything like we have today. There would be no mass set of standards. If you had one business where the people all decided to say, we're going to, anyone who comes in here to do business with them, we're going to beat them up first. Theoretically, if they all voted for that, would that be allowed under Trotskyism?
If the workers voted.
If the workers voted that every single person who comes in here to buy something, we're just going to beat them up before we sell to them. Theoretically, would that work? I'm just trying to gauge how extreme things can go.
Well, the thing in communism is you're trying to get to the point where there's no money actually.
Right.
So, the product of the means of production is just distributed as according to each person's need.
So if it's
it seems and obviously people, as we don't agree with communism, it seems very wishful thinking.
Yeah.
But
I guess the question I would ask is, under which form of communism would be the one that would probably have the least monetary involvement? Which one is the one that's closest to the whole, here's your ration of food for the week, sir, have a nice day?
Well, and
here's your ration of toilet paper for the month.
You get a lot of people who are communists say communism has never been attempted. Everything that we've ever seen is state capitalism. The means of production were not controlled by the workers. It was controlled by the state. So that's not actually communism because, communism is about the workers control the factories. The workers control the means of production. So in terms of like, here's your stipend, this is what's allotted to you, that would be, I mean, under all variations of communism, you saw that to a degree, but, you know, in the Soviet Union, there was still a currency.
Right.
There were still businesses where people bought things from. These were just state-owned. The last thing I want to get into that we're going to close out with is anarcho-communism, which
seems to be our enemy's favorite ideology.
Yeah, I don't really get along with anarcho-communists so much. But, a lot of people see that as a contradiction of terms, anarcho-communism, how it even works. It also goes by the name of libertarian socialism or red and black anarchism. Libertarian socialism actually predates American libertarianism, and I state this to libertarians and they laugh about it, but they don't know. It's kind of frustrating. But anarcho-communism is about the abolition of the state, capitalism, wage labor, money, and private property altogether. It's about common ownership of the means of production, and it's done through direct democracy through networks of worker councils. So this all sounds very complicated, but this has actually existed as opposed to like anarcho-capitalism or even to a large degree libertarianism. The example that you can point to where this existed is Republican Spain during the Spanish Civil War, which, there's a good movie that I really like about the Spanish Civil War called Land and Freedom. It came out in 1995. You see in the movie they have the councils where the people, they have common ownership of the land, and they say, they're having arguments, amongst each other, like, this is how we want to use things, this is how we want to collectivize things. In Republican Spain, this is going to sound really weird, but like farm plots, you would be assigned to the farm plot, and you would take turns being the person in charge.
Interesting.
And like in Republican Spain, like you don't receive for your production proportional to the effort that you put into it. It's based on tangible like need. So people that were, say, a single guy in his 20s who worked in the field, he receives less than just a large family.
Yeah.
It's based on vouchers that's given to you that you exchange for products. Anarcho-communism also is related to anarcho-syndicalism, which is a lot of what we saw in revolutionary or Republican Spain, which is actually more of a focus on building worker unions in factories itself and organizing the revolution through the expansion of unions, which will eventually, revolt against the capitalist class. Anarcho-communism is an internationalist system. It's focused on cooperation over competition. You see communes. It's focused on localism and self-management. One of the most well-known intellectuals of anarcho-communism is Noam Chomsky, which I've always had a lot of fun listening and reading Noam Chomsky's stuff, even though I don't agree with his stuff, his viewpoints whatsoever. Well, I won't say that. I don't believe in his political ideologies. He actually does have a worldview that's a lot more coherent than other things. But, I don't have too much other about anarcho-communism. It's very obscure. I don't even think a lot of people that call themselves anarchists or anarcho-communists, which red and black anarchism, anarcho-communists are the original anarchists. It's not anarcho-capitalism that came way later. I don't think these people understand fully how they would enact this system. But,
Well, I actually did want to bring up that point because, we know a lot of people, or we've dealt with people a lot who are anarcho-communists there.
Yeah.
And we've had this discussion amongst ourselves before that we don't feel like they are trying to build anything. They are only out to destroy. They are there to,
it's part of their
they're there to destroy the state and destroy capitalism and destroy wages and destroy labor and destroy money and destroy private property.
Yeah.
And they don't believe in those things already, so they are okay with, conducting violence already against, someone's private property. Let's say it's your car. They don't believe in private property, so they have no reason to not hit your car with something. That's why it does attract a lot of, groups like Antifa and whatnot.
Yeah.
I mean, if you haven't seen an anarcho-communist flag, you probably have. It's the one that is the reason why we call it red and black anarchism is because it's got the anarcho-communist flag that's, divided horizontally. The top left portion horizontal is red. The bottom right portion is black.
Yeah.
You've probably seen that if you've seen any pictures of literally any political protest event over the last 2 years. I guarantee you've seen that flag.
If Antifa showed up,
you'll
see one.
Just Google anarcho-communist flag, and you've probably been like, yeah, I've seen that thing before.
Yeah. But, anarcho-syndicalism, communism, national, or libertarian socialism, I know about it a lot better than most people. I've read Noam Chomsky's book on anarchism, which is very interesting. And I've read Homage to Catalonia by George Orwell, and they talk about how this, society actually ran for 3 years before, they lost that to Franco. And it's interesting. I don't know. People all across, the world were coming out to help form these societies. They were taking volunteers into the Foreign Legion that, fought for the Republicans that wasn't based in hierarchy. Like, anarcho-communism is like a rejection of hierarchy. There's no elitism. There's no leaders. It's about us as a collective, a decentralized, stateless collective. So it's pretty esoteric, but
I guess the question that I have regarding anarcho-communism is one of the bullet points you have written down here in this document we're reading is networks of worker councils.
Yes.
How exactly would that work out?
So the councils are the ones that decide how they distribute things. They are the ones that, like, the councils will be, because, they'll be the ones that have control over the means of production.
Okay.
They will be the ones that set society, and they're the ones that are handing out the vouchers for things.
So would it almost be along the lines of us as the workers working at, I don't know, Walmart, vote to put our person in charge of us, and then that person represents us at with other representatives from other.
We wouldn't vote to put someone in charge of us. So say, and I might be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure I understand how this works. Say you take the Walmart example. We are a worker council. The means of production is the Walmart. Us as the workers there, we vote on the actions that Walmart takes.
Okay.
And we are also in a network of councils with other workers in other Walmarts. And our anarchist society is based around our connection as a network of workers united against, fascist or capitalist or whatever.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. It's a really strange ideology.
I just wasn't quite sure what you'd meant by, networks of worker councils, so.
Yeah. But, that's about it, though. We went through all the ones that I wanted to talk about. I think we got some good content out of it all. We just have a couple people watching the live stream, but we'll get this up on the RSS feed pretty soon. We're going to do the live show on Sunday at 3 p.m.
3 p.m. Central Time, 4 p.m. Eastern.
4 p.m. Eastern, and that's obviously to American time zones, because we know we have a lot of foreign listeners. But we hope you enjoyed and learned something from this midweek on political theories. We haven't done a midweek in a while. I've missed it, but
It's been a good 3 or 4 weeks since we've actually done us sitting down together recording. But this is the first time that we're trying out this new equipment. For the first time ever, for those of you who are watching us on the live stream right now, or if you're watching us, at some later time that's not actually live, what you will realize is that we do have two different microphones.
Yeah, we got the studio set up.
We got the studio set up. We've got a sound
nice.
mixer, so both of these are going into just one stream, and that's all going together. So I think it'll work out pretty well. And obviously, we're going to use this. This one's kind of our test, and if we have to edit or adjust anything, we will do that for our Sunday show. So I hope this video actually sounds pretty well once we put it up in the podcast and the RSS feed.
It should.
So if it doesn't, don't worry, we'll fix any problems by Sunday.
But yeah, with that, I just want to say thank you for listening to another episode of Trump Public Radio, and have a good one.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.